woman is standing in her kitchen at 10:47 p.m. The apartment is quiet in the way only late nights can be. No music, no voices, just the low hum of the refrigerator, the soft glow from under the cabinets, and the light from her phone reflecting against her face. She is not shopping for anything urgent. There is no emergency. Nothing in the cart is necessary tonight, and still her thumb keeps moving, add to cart. Scroll, compare, remove, add again. It is something she did not plan to buy. Something she was not looking for this morning. Something she could absolutely live without. And that is what makes the moment so easy to misunderstand. Because from the outside it would be simple to call this irresponsibility, to call it poor self-control, to reduce it to one more woman making one more unnecessary purchase late at night. But that would miss what is actually happening here. She is not doing this because she is shallow. She is not doing this because she is careless. She is not even doing this because she truly wants the thing itself, as much as she thinks she does. She is doing it because something in her is reaching for the feeling that comes before the purchase lands. That tiny emotional lift. That quiet little high. That private sense that something is about to improve. For a few seconds, life feels like it is moving. For a few seconds, she does not feel stuck in the same version of her life. For a few seconds, she feels like maybe she is catching up. Maybe she is not behind. Maybe something is shifting. And that is where this gets interesting. Because this same woman will tell you she wants peace. She will tell you she wants financial power. She will tell you she is tired of wasting money. She will tell you she wants to feel more in control, more intentional, more secure. She means all of it. And yet, in private, when no one is watching, when the day has gone quiet and her thoughts are louder than the room, she keeps buying things she does not need. Not every day. Not always dramatically. Not in a way that looks reckless enough to scare her. Just enough. Just often enough. Just quietly enough for it to become a pattern without fully becoming a confession. So what is this really? Is it a discipline problem? Is it just bad habits? Is it a lack of financial maturity? Or is she responding to something deeper than the item itself? Because sometimes the most expensive purchases are not the ones you cannot afford. They are the ones you quietly use to regulate who you are feeling like. The ones you reach for when you do not like the version of yourself you are sitting with. The ones you use to soften stress, or silence disappointment, or create the temporary illusion that life is becoming more beautiful, more organized, more elevated, more okay. And if that is true, then this is no longer just a story about buying things you do not need. It becomes a story about identity, about emotion, about the hidden psychological reasons a woman can want financial peace and still find herself searching for relief in a checkout page. And that is where this conversation really begins. She buys the skincare that promises a reset, the new planner that feels like a cleaner life, the matching set that makes her feel a little more put together, the upgraded water bottle that seems to belong to a woman who has her habits under control, the luxury candle that makes the apartment feel softer, calmer, more like the version of adulthood she thought she would be living by now, the course she swore she was going to finish, the bag she calls an investment because saying that out loud makes the purchase feel smarter, more justified, more permanent than it really is, the little treat after a hard week, then another little treat, because the first one did not hold long enough. And that is what makes this so difficult to catch in real time. None of these things look dangerous. That is the problem. Because financial self-destruction rarely arrives looking reckless. It does not always enter a woman's life wearing disaster on its face. Sometimes it arrives looking beautiful, curated, soft, rewarded, deserved. It comes wrapped in language that sounds harmless. You earned this. It is not that expensive. You work hard. You deserve nice things. It is just one thing. It is for your growth. It is for your wellness. It is for the woman you are becoming. And maybe that is why the pattern survives for so long. Because it does not feel like sabotage when it is happening. It feels like comfort. It feels like self-respect. It feels like recovery. It feels like hope. It feels like a woman trying to bring herself back to life in small, pretty ways. But under that surface, something more complicated is often happening. She is not buying chaos. She is buying emotional correction. She is not always chasing the product, she is chasing relief. She is not always trying to impress other people, sometimes she is trying to calm herself. She is not always purchasing an object, sometimes she is purchasing a temporary identity. A more organized woman, a more stable woman, a more attractive woman, a more disciplined woman, a more powerful woman, a more okay woman. And for a moment it works. That is the seductive part. For a moment, the purchase gives shape to an emotion that felt too heavy, too vague, too private to name. It gives her something to anticipate, something to open, something to become, something to point to and say, maybe this is the shift. But the relief is brief, and because it is brief, the mind does not always learn caution. Sometimes it learns repetition. That is why this conversation cannot stay shallow, because many Americans are already financially stretched. More than one-third, 37%, used emergency savings during 29%, said they had more credit card debt than emergency saving of these purchases. That changes the serum, the planner, the bag, the candle, the class, or the quiet late-night checkout. The hidden danger is what repeated emotional spending does when your financial base is already thin. When the money underneath you is fragile, even soft habits can hit hard. Even beautiful habits. Even normalized habits. Even habits that do not look alarming enough to challenge. And that is why this is bigger than shopping. Because the real question is not, why did I buy that? The real question is, what did that purchase help me avoid feeling for 5 minutes? This is where the conversation becomes more honest. Because this video is not about telling women to stop liking nice things. It is not anti-beauty. It is not anti-comfort. It is not anti-luxury. It is not anti-femininity. This is not a sermon against softness. It is not an argument for deprivation. It is not a call for women to become smaller, harsher, or less expressive in order to be taken seriously with money. It is about something much subtler than that. It is about the hidden reason a purchase can feel necessary even when, logically, it is not. Because sometimes we buy things we do not need for a reason that has very little to do with the item itself. The human brain does not only spend for utility, it also spends for relief, for identity, for control, for novelty, for hope, for self-repair. And once you see that clearly, a lot of behavior that looked random starts to make emotional sense. Because when life feels uncertain, buying can feel like movement. Not real movement necessarily, not always meaningful movement, but movement enough to interrupt the feeling of being stuck. You may not know what to do about your finances yet. You may not know how to fix your career tension, your loneliness, your stress, your comparison, your exhaustion, or your fear that life is not moving the way it should. But you can choose something. You can order something. You can upgrade something. You can begin again through something. And that action, however small, can create a strange emotional illusion. An illusion that something in your life is progressing. An illusion that you are becoming someone. An illusion that you are not standing still. That matters more than people realize, especially in a culture where money stress is already sitting quietly in the background of so many women's lives. Because when money is a pressure point, the brain does not always respond by becoming perfectly disciplined. Sometimes it responds by reaching for quick forms of relief that feel productive in the moment. Not because the person is foolish, not because she lacks intelligence, but because stress changes what feels urgent. And under stress, emotional soothing can start to masquerade as decision-making. That is the hidden truth. A lot of unnecessary spending is not irrational. It is emotionally logical. That is why smart women do it. That is why ambitious women do it. That is why self-aware women still do it. Because the purchase often solves something real, just not for very long. It may solve tension for 10 minutes. It may solve boredom for an hour. It may solve emptiness for one evening. It may solve the discomfort of feeling behind, unseen, disorganized, unattractive, unfocused, or out of control. It may not solve the deeper issue, but it solves the emotional moment just enough to get repeated. And that is why this conversation cannot be reduced to budgeting tips alone. Because this is not only a math issue, it is a meaning issue. It is about what the item represents, what the purchase interrupts, what the transaction lets you feel, who the product quietly allows you to become for a second. And until that part is understood, a woman can keep blaming herself for behavior that is not random at all. She thinks she has a spending problem. But sometimes what she really has is an emotional pattern that learned how to dress itself up as preference. And that is a very different thing. So let us finally name the hidden structure. Because once you can name a pattern, you stop being quietly controlled by it. A lot of women think their unnecessary spending is random, that it happens in moods, that it is just bad timing, weak discipline, or poor self-control. But often, there is a psychological structure underneath it. And when you see that structure, the behavior becomes much easier to understand. There are 4 hidden psychological reasons women buy what they do not need. The first is relief. Sometimes she buys because the purchase interrupts pressure. Not forever, just enough. A bad day becomes softer. Loneliness becomes decorated. Stress becomes aesthetic. Boredom becomes a package on the way. And that is important to understand because in many cases, the item is not the medicine. The anticipation is, the waiting, the tracking number, the idea that something is coming, The tiny emotional lift of knowing that in a few days there will be a box, a moment, a reveal. Sometimes that future package is not just an object, it is a temporary emotional event. A small promise placed into the week. The second reason is identity repair. Sometimes she buys because the product helps her temporarily become the version of herself she misses. Organized, elegant, disciplined, fit, wealthy, soft, ahead. That new planner is not always just paper. Sometimes it is a fantasy of order. That expensive skincare is not always just skincare. Sometimes it is a fantasy of being a woman who has time, softness, and control over herself. That matching set is not always just clothing. Sometimes it is a bridge into feeling more put together than she actually feels inside. She is not always buying the object. Sometimes she is buying access to a self-image, a version of herself that feels more coherent, more beautiful, more stable, more in control, more aligned with who she believes she should already be by now. The third reason is control. When life feels uncertain, buying can feel decisive. You may not control the economy. You may not control your career timing. You may not control dating, family, inflation, or even your emotional state. You may not know when things will settle down. You may not know when you will finally feel secure. You may not know when life will stop feeling like it keeps moving the finish line. But you can click order now. And that tiny act feels like power. It feels like choice. It feels like action. It feels like proof that you can still move something, choose something, direct something. Even if the rest of life feels unclear, the checkout page gives you a clean decision. And for a brain that is tired of uncertainty, that can feel deeply comforting. The fourth reason is hope. Some purchases are not really about today. They are purchases for the life she believes she is about to become. The gym version of her, the rich version of her, the healed version of her, the hyperproductive version of her, the emotionally stable version of her, the version that wakes up early, drinks more water, gets her life together, stops procrastinating, becomes more attractive, more consistent, more powerful. So she spends in advance of her own transformation. She buys for the woman she hopes is almost here. And that is why these purchases can feel so hard to resist, because they are not just attached to pleasure. They are attached to possibility. They carry emotional meaning, they carry identity meaning, they carry future meaning, and that is why buying things you do not need can feel so personal. Because the item is rarely the whole transaction. The unseen part is psychological. The brain loves unnecessary buying for a reason. Not because the brain is stupid, not because you are shallow, not because women are secretly bad with money. The brain loves it because unnecessary buying often delivers the exact kind of reward the human mind is most vulnerable to. Immediate, emotionally loaded, easy to access, identity enhancing. And that combination is powerful and unnecessary. Purchase often checks all four. It gives instant novelty, something new to look at, something new to imagine, something new to want. It creates a future event, delivery. Now there is something coming, something on the way, something to track, something to anticipate, something to emotionally lean toward. It gives visual confirmation, the cart, the receipt, the confirmation email, the shipping notification, the package at the door. It creates a mini fantasy, not just of owning the item, but of becoming the woman who matches it. And for a moment it changes your emotional temperature. That part matters. Because a lot of spending is not really about the financial value of the item. It is about the emotional effect of the process. The scroll changes your mood. The decision changes your mood. The purchase changes your mood. The anticipation changes your mood. Even before the thing arrives, something inside you already feels slightly different. That is why even small purchases matter. Not because every coffee ruins a woman's future. Not because every candle is a crisis. Not because every little treat means something is wrong. But because repeated microspending can quietly train the brain to seek external relief every time discomfort appears. That is where the pattern forms. You feel off, you buy. You feel stressed, you browse. You feel empty, you add something to cart. You feel behind, you purchase a version of progress. You feel uncertain, you create a delivery to look forward to. And when that happens enough times, the brain starts connecting spending with emotional regulation. Not always in dramatic ways, in subtle ways, elegant ways, normalized ways. The purchase feels small, the pattern is not. And modern buying environments make this even easier. In the United States, e-commerce made up 16.4% of total retail sales in 2025, which means a huge amount of spending now happens inside systems designed to make checkout fast, smooth, and low friction. One-click tools. Stored cards, mobile wallets, and simplified checkout flows remove the pause that used to give people a few extra seconds to reconsider. That reduced friction matters psychologically. Because friction is not just inconvenience. Sometimes friction is a moment of truth, a moment to feel the purchase, a moment to reconsider, a moment to ask, do I actually want this, or do I want relief? But digital spending often softens that moment, and research supports the idea that payment method changes behavior. Recent studies found that electronic payments tend to hurt less than cash, and a 2024 meta-analysis across 71 pascals per second found that consumers generally spend more with cashless methods than with cash. So when people say, it was only a small purchase, sometimes what they miss is this: small purchases can still build strong conditioning, not because the item is huge, but because the loop is. The brain notices what brings quick relief. The brain remembers what interrupts discomfort. The brain repeats what works fast, and unnecessary buying works fast. It is available in bed, available in the kitchen, available in the car, available in lonely moments, available after hard conversations, available after comparison spirals, available after long workdays, available at 10:47 p.m. when the apartment is quiet and your thoughts feel louder than the room. That is why this is not just a money conversation. It is a conditioning conversation. It is a pattern conversation. It is a brain conversation. Because once a woman sees that she is not randomly overspending, she stops misdiagnosing herself as weak. She starts realizing something much more useful, that her behavior may not be random at all. It may be trained. It may be emotional. It may be reinforced. It may be quietly shaped by a world that has made spending faster, softer, prettier, and easier to confuse with relief. And once she sees that, she can stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, what has my brain learned to use as comfort? Because not every purchase is avoidance. Some things are beautiful and useful. Some things are chosen with clarity. Some things genuinely support your life. Some things really are care. But some purchases wear the costume of self-care while functioning as self-escape. And that is the dangerous zone. Because the dangerous things in life are not always the obviously destructive ones. Sometimes the most powerful patterns survive because they look soft. They look harmless. They look feminine. They look deserved. They look like healing when they are really interruption. That is why this distinction matters so much. Self-care says, I am supporting my life. Self-escape says, I need this feeling right now so I do not have to sit with myself. One builds you. One distracts you. One strengthens your life over time. One gives you a temporary emotional detour. And the line between them can look beautiful. That is why so many women miss it. Because the purchase does not always look messy enough to question. Sometimes it looks elevated, curated, intentional, even wise. But the psychology underneath it can be completely different. Take the outfit you buy because you love style. That is very different from the outfit you buy because you cannot bear feeling invisible. On the outside, both women leave with clothes. But psychologically, one is expressing herself. The other is trying to rescue herself. Take the course you invest in because you are serious. That is very different from the course you buy because purchasing it feels easier than becoming it. One is commitment. The other is emotional substitution. One woman is building skill. The other is buying the feeling of progress because real progress feels slower, harder, and less glamorous than checkout. Take the home decor you genuinely enjoy. That is very different from the decor that helps you hide the anxiety that your life does not feel stable. One is pleasure. The other is emotional camouflage. And this is why the other conversation has to become more honest than, did I technically need it? Because sometimes that is the wrong question. The deeper question is, what role was this purchase playing for me emotionally? Was it adding to my life? Or was it helping me momentarily leave my life? Because the problem is not only wasted money. The problem is what repeated soothing through spending teaches your identity. It teaches, I feel bad, I buy. I feel uncertain, I buy. I feel behind, I buy. I feel empty, I buy. I feel overlooked, I buy. I feel emotionally unsettled, I buy. And after enough repetition, that stops being a random habit. It becomes an internal script, a learned response, a quiet agreement between your discomfort and your wallet. And after enough repetition, your wallet stops being a financial tool. It becomes an emotional emergency room, a place you rush to every time something hurts, a place you visit every time you do not want to sit still long enough to hear what is actually wrong. And that is where the danger becomes bigger than shopping. Because now the issue is not just money leaving your account. The issue is that your sense of regulation is being outsourced. Your purchases begin doing emotional jobs they were never meant to do. Your spending starts holding the responsibility for soothing sadness, calming uncertainty, softening insecurity, decorating loneliness, and manufacturing little flashes of hope. That is too much power to give a transaction. And modern payment systems can make this even easier to hide from yourself. A 2025 Lending Tree survey found that 52% of emotional spenders said buy now, pay later made them more likely to engage in emotional spending. The easier it becomes to split the payment, the easier it becomes to ignore the emotional decision underneath it. The item feels manageable. The payment feels delayed. The emotion gets to stay disguised. That matters because split payments do not just divide the cost. Sometimes they divide your awareness of the cost. And that creates a very specific kind of vulnerability. Not loud recklessness, soft detachment. You get the emotional reward now. You deal with the financial reality later. And that gap is where self-escape becomes especially seductive. Because anything that lets a woman feel better now while postponing the full emotional and financial weight of the choice can become very hard to resist, especially when she is tired, especially when she is lonely, especially when she is under pressure, especially when she is trying to look okay while not fully feeling okay. And this is why the distinction matters. Not to shame women for wanting beautiful things, not to turn pleasure into guilt, but to expose the hidden moment where support becomes sedation, where care becomes escape, where relief becomes identity training. Because once a woman can see that line clearly, she stops being charmed by every beautiful thing that promises to comfort her, and she starts asking a harder, more powerful question. Is this actually caring for me? Or is it just helping me not feel me? This part matters, because if we talk about women and money carelessly, we miss the real issue and replace understanding with insult. This is not about saying women are naturally worse with money. That is lazy, that is false, and it explains nothing. What is more true is that women are often sold more emotional meaning through consumption. That changes the psychology of buying, because many women are not just marketed products. They are marketed reinvention, desirability, control, worthiness, calm, prestige, healing, becoming. That is a very different kind of pressure. It means the purchase is rarely presented as, buy this item. It is presented as, buy the feeling of being more complete, buy the version of yourself that looks more together, buy the version of yourself that feels more chosen, buy the version of yourself that seems calmer, softer, prettier, more powerful, more healed, more in control. So the spending does not just feel functional. It feels intimate. Because the product is not only speaking to a preference, it is speaking to an insecurity. It is addressing a fear, a longing, a private tenderness, a quiet dissatisfaction a woman may not even have named out loud. And that is why the buying can feel so emotionally loaded. The lipstick is not always just lipstick. The decor is not always just decor. The wellness purchase is not always just wellness. The program is not always just education. The bag is not always just a bag. Sometimes psychologically, the product is carrying a promise that you will finally feel enough. Enough to be seen, enough to be admired, enough to be secure, enough to be soft, enough to be disciplined, enough to be the woman you thought you would be by now. And when a purchase is tied to that kind of meaning, it no longer behaves like a neutral object in the mind. It starts behaving like emotional possibility. That is why this hits women in a psychologically specific way, not because women are weak, not because women are frivolous, but because women are often sold identity through consumption at a much more intimate level. Men are often sold power through status and utility. Women are often sold power through transformation and self-presentation. That difference matters. It means a man may be told this makes you stronger, more capable, more respected. A woman may be told this makes you more radiant, more worthy, more elegant, more whole. So even when the spending looks similar on the outside, the emotional architecture underneath it can be very different. A woman may think she is buying beauty, lifestyle, wellness, or improvement. But psychologically, she may be buying hope that she will finally feel right inside herself, and that is why shame does not fix this. In fact, shame often makes it worse. Because shame deepens the exact emotional hole that spending was trying to cover. If a woman already feels behind, ashamed, messy, weak, out of control, or not enough, and then she adds humiliation on top of that, she has not healed the pattern. She has intensified the pain driving the pattern. Now she does not just feel empty, she feels empty and ashamed. Now she does not just feel financially disappointed. She feels financially disappointed and morally flawed. And that emotional state does not usually produce clarity. It often produces another reach for relief. That is why self-judgment can become part of the cycle. She buys. She regrets it. She criticizes herself. She feels worse. She wants relief. She buys again. And because the pattern is emotional at its core, punishment rarely resolves it. Understanding does. You do not heal overbuying by humiliating yourself. You heal it by understanding what the purchase has been doing for you, what emotion it was interrupting, what insecurity it was soothing, what identity it was trying to temporarily restore, what version of you it was helping you feel close to for a moment. Because once you understand that, the pattern stops looking like proof that you are broken. It starts looking like evidence that you were trying to meet a real emotional need in a costly way. And that is a very different thing. It is the difference between condemning yourself and finally seeing yourself clearly. And for many women, that clarity is where change begins. Now the identity has to shift, because this is not about deprivation. This is not about turning into the woman who never wants anything, the woman who feels guilty for beauty, the woman who punishes herself for pleasure, the woman who becomes hard, joyless, and hyper-restricted in the name of being responsible. That is not power. That is fear wearing the costume of discipline. The wealthy woman is not the woman who never wants anything. She is the woman who can tell the difference between wanting a thing and needing a thing to change how she feels about herself. That difference changes everything. Because once a woman can feel desire without becoming emotionally controlled by it, she enters a different level of power. She can want the dress without needing the dress to make her feel visible. She can want the upgrade without needing the upgrade to make her feel important. She can want the experience without needing the purchase to rescue her from herself. That is a very different relationship with money. Because real financial power is not just the ability to buy. It is the ability to remain whole before, during, and after the option to buy. Whole before, so desire does not automatically become dependency. Whole during, so the moment of choice stays clear instead of emotionally hijacked. Whole after, so her identity does not rise and fall with what she owns, what she upgrades, or what arrives at her door. That is why this conversation is deeper than spending less. Poor is not the same as purchasing less. Rich is not the same as purchasing more. A woman can spend very little and still be psychologically controlled by lack, shame, fear, and emotional hunger. A woman can spend a lot and still be weak in the presence of manipulation, insecurity, and image. So the issue is not just the amount. The issue is the hook. Power is being unhooked. Power is being harder to manipulate. Power is not needing a transaction to restore your sense of self. That is what makes a woman dangerous in the best way. Not because she has stopped liking beautiful things, but because beautiful things can no longer cheaply control her emotions. She can enjoy without attaching her worth. She can desire without collapsing into impulse. She can admire without immediately converting emotion into spending. And in this economy, that matters even more. At the start of 2026, 60% of Americans said their financial situation was the same or worse than a year earlier, including 17% who said they were worse off. That means many people are already moving through life with limited margin, reduced flexibility, and more pressure on every financial decision. So emotional spending deserves serious attention. Because in a tight economy, repeated small leaks do not stay small. They turn into delayed goals, reduced breathing room, less flexibility, more dependence on credit, more vulnerability to stress, more distance between a woman and the life she says she wants to build. That is why the reframe matters. This is not about becoming restrictive. It is about becoming less available for emotional manipulation, whether that manipulation comes from marketing, stress, loneliness, boredom, insecurity, or the quiet ache of not feeling like enough. The wealthy woman is not the woman who says no to everything. She is the woman whose yes is finally clean. Maybe the deepest financial shift for a woman is not the day she stops buying unnecessary things. Maybe it is the day she realizes those things were never random. The day she finally sees that some of her spending was not greed. It was grief, pressure, loneliness, comparison, hope, fantasy, self-soothing, fear of being left behind. The day she understands that buying more was sometimes her quiet way of trying to feel safer, prettier, calmer, ahead, more in control, more enough. Not because she was foolish, not because she was shallow, but because she was human, because she was carrying something, because she was trying, in the only language she had available in those moments, to change how it felt to be herself. And maybe that is where real wealth begins. Not in the cart, not in the package, not in the performance of having taste, not in the image of looking elevated while quietly feeling emotionally dependent on what you consume. Maybe real wealth begins in a much less glamorous place. In the moment a woman can sit inside her own discomfort, hear what it is asking for, and refuse to hand the job of saving her identity to a checkout page. In the moment she realizes that not every feeling needs a purchase. Not every ache needs a product. Not every low moment needs a reward. Not every insecurity needs to be dressed up. Not every version of emptiness needs to be filled with something that arrives in a box. Because a wealthy woman is not just a woman who can afford more. She is a woman who is no longer so easily emotionally purchased. She is harder to rush, harder to manipulate, harder to hook, harder to convince that her wholeness is one more item away. And that is a different kind of rich, a quieter kind, a deeper kind, a kind that does not always look flashy online but changes everything underneath a woman's life. Because the wealthy woman code was never just about money. It was always about the psychology of becoming a woman who cannot be cheaply controlled, not by fear, not by image, not by impulse, not even by her own old patterns.